Welcome to the webinar, Taking the Stage in Building with Nature. Today I am hosting this webinar. My name is Simeon Moons. I work at Roy Haskoning DHV, partner of EcoShape, and I am hosting this together with my co-host Belinda Burtonshaw, also a valued colleague at Roy Haskoning DHV. We are going to talk about the enablers, technology and system knowledge, as well as understanding natural dynamics and how to cope with them using adaptive maintenance, monitoring, and management. So now, before we start, I would like to give the word to Belinda to set some rules for this webinar.
Thank you very much, Simeon. Also, welcome to this webinar from me. As Simeon said, before we start, I would like to share with you some rules for this webinar. And as you may notice, when you entered the webinar, you are not allowed to open your microphone or to have a video. And also, you do not see a chat function, but there is a little Q&A function for questions. We will try our best to stay in time, and we have 1 hour for the first enabler and another hour for the second enabler. As I just said, it is possible to ask questions. You see a little window, and there is a little mark with questions. You can ask your questions in that box. And if you add a little OK, then we may make a live video audio connection with you so that you can ask your question live to our presenters. And also your questions will only be visible for the organizers. Another remark, we will record this webinar and it will be made available later. So let's start now. And Simeon, what is actually EcoShape?
Yes, thank you, Belinda. EcoShape is a private public foundation that has been made up out of a consortium of ecosystem specialists, engineering consultants, knowledge institutes, contractors, and NGOs. And EcoShape has been working towards developing and enabling building with nature and sharing knowledge. And they have been doing this for 12 years now, really doing a lot of research applied, but also fundamental, and working towards pilot projects. And this has all been described in our latest book that is, I think, just about ready. And you can find on our website, ecoshape.org. It's called Creating, Implementing, and Upscaling Nature-Based Solutions. And it really is 12 years in the making, and it's fantastic. It looks very nice. I welcome you all to see it. But before we go any further, let me first introduce our topic of today in the first hour. We are going to talk about enablers. And we have, this is a series called Upscaling Building with Nature Together. And we have already tackled a few enablers. And we've learned from the speakers there. And today we will focus on 2 enablers named technology and system knowledge, which will be the first hour. And then the second hour we will focus on management, monitoring, and maintenance. So I think let's first start. I'll give the word to Belinda to introduce our first speaker of today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Simeon. As you just mentioned, there is a very nice platform of EcoShape where a lot of knowledge is collected and presented. And today we have Jurre de Vries, who helped to set up this platform. Jurre is working as an environmental engineer at Oord Dredging and Marine Contractors. He has a background in earth science and holds a PhD in physical ocean geography. And as I just said, Jurre helped to create the platform. And I hope we have a live connection with Jurre now. Jurre, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hello, Belinda.
Hello, how are you today?
Yeah, pretty good. Yes.
I think we can see your screen, and I think it would be very nice if you walk us through the website. So the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Belinda. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, thank you for giving me this opportunity to tell a bit more about the work we did this year on the new website. As Simeon already said, yeah, EcoShape is all about developing knowledge on building of nature, but also sharing this. And yeah, one of the ways of sharing is through this platform. You can see it already on the screen. But it's of course a bit, yeah, why a new website? Yeah, so we worked on this for the last year very intensively. But there was also a website already in the past, of course. It's not, it's new. But yeah, we did a major upgrade because actually in the first program, so EcoShape already exists for 12 years. And the first program, there were actually two websites. There was a guidelines website where there was really practical knowledge and guidance for your own, to build your own building of nature solution. And there was a more general website from EcoShape. And as a, let's say, a final product for the second program from EcoShape, we decided to merge these two websites. And also include all the latest knowledge that's there, of course, since yeah, in the last few years, a lot of new insights have become available, and we all put this on the new platform. Yeah, we worked on this new platform in the EcoShape spirit, so that's working together in a multidisciplinary team. So we had consortium members of the different consortium partners together in the platform team. Yeah, and together we developed this new setting. You can see already the website here, which says really big, of course, building of nature. And it all starts then, yeah, with the mindset that you need to have as if you want to implement building of nature. And that's also our starting point. So you really have to understand the philosophy of taking the system as a starting point, involving all the stakeholders at an early stage. And if you want to know more about this mindset and this way how to do this, yeah, you can directly click at the homepage and you can read more about this. Of course, you can also pre-order the book already. As was just said, this is the book of concept, one of the products of the EcoShape 2 program, and a lot of information from the book is also on the website. And you can already access a few different items, and I will guide you through the website. But before that, I wanted to discuss some of the challenges we had, also just to give you a bit of a background, because yeah, we had two websites, of course, which we merged into one. And one of the things we encountered was really the challenge that we have so many different target groups that we want to serve, and it's of course difficult to provide them with the useful information at the right place for all of them. We kind of solve that by having a separation in a get inspired area and a get started area. So the get inspired is really to get ideas about building of nature, and the get started is yeah, really if you want to have hands-on guidance, basically. And I will guide you through it now. And first we start with get inspired. So let's get inspired a bit by building of nature. Yeah, if you're interested, you can, of course, read about the EcoShape pilots. So a lot of pilots have been done by EcoShape, and information about those pilots and also the results are presented here. But you can also learn a bit more the personal side of it. So we have different experts that we interviewed, and their stories you can hear or read about here. You see it's pretty empty still, but that's actually on purpose. We will, towards the Climate Adaptation Summit, that's the end of January, the road towards it, basically. So from now until end of January, every so many weeks we will post a new interview or roundtable discussion. So yeah, just check out this site once in a while if you want to know more about these personal stories. Then, as I said already, one of the main things of building of nature is, of course, the system thinking. So really taking the system as a starting point. System is a bit vague still, so we separated system in 6 different landscapes. And for those landscapes, at this area, you can already get some inspiration. What building with nature concepts, what ideas should you think of? This is one of the pictures that's also in the book of concepts. And you see already these different dots. They represent the different concepts that are possible in this landscape. But it's very important, or we want to emphasize here that it's very important that you should think from that landscape perspective. And then because of that, you should also understand that landscape, of course. So we provide some more information on the ecological benefits, but also the social aspects, so the places to live, how we as humans benefit from this landscape. And we also really provide more detailed information, which you can find at the details, of course. This is really a bit more the focus on let's say the system or the landscape understanding. But to successfully implement building with nature, it's also important to know about how does a concept work. So building with nature RD, how does it work? Now this is a very famous one, of course, the sand or the sand motor, or as a concept we call it applying mega nourishments. And at this page you can find more information about what the concept is, so how does it work, and also some practical guidance if you would like to implement this solution for yourself. This is, as I said, not a description of the sand motor itself, but it's actually a more generic way of implementing this specific type of concept. We also linked it to cases, so those are projects, building with nature projects from all partners that might be relevant if you would like to implement such a concept. And we also have a whole range of tools that might be useful if you want to design your own mega nourishment. And we have a whole bunch of those concepts, of course. So that's what you can all see here. So this is already, we're now arrived already in the get started area. So this is really the more practical part. This really provides you with guidance. So we hope you can, this will be useful for your own, for yourself to implement building with nature. And for implementing building with nature, you need different things, of course. It's that landscape perspective. So you have to understand the system. You have to understand the technology itself. And that's what this enabler of the enabler of today is also about, of course. And you also have to have a general building with nature approach. And all this information you can find on the platform. Besides that, we have a whole evidence base. So here we have case descriptions, and in these case descriptions, there's also information on how to construct these concepts, for example, but also on how to maintain them. So that links more to the enabler of adaptive management and maintenance. And we have tools where there's also information about how to monitor, for example, and a lot of other knowledge articles that have been developed as part of the EcoShape program. And last but not least, we of course have information on the enabler. So what's really necessary about for implementing building with nature. Now, this webinar is also very helpful, of course, to learn more about it. But if you want to know more, check out the platform. Of course, you will know after today a lot about the technology and the management, monitoring, and maintenance. But as you can see, if you want to know more today already, you can also learn more about the 4 enablers on our platform. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention and give it on again to Simeon and Belinda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jurre, for this nice overview of the new website. It looks very interesting, and I would like to encourage everyone to visit and explore, because it's much more extensive, I think, than you just showed it. But let's move on to the topics of today. As Jurre already showed, we have some beautiful landscapes and concepts, but how do you know which one to use for your problem, to solve your problem? And I think the first enabler that we're talking about, technology and system knowledge, really captures the essence of building with nature. It all starts with understanding your system and utilizing the natural processes to your benefit. So the key approaches for this enabler will be to first analyze the system at a larger scale and understand the driving processes, both physical and ecological, maybe even a step further social, and to understand the natural dynamics involved. If you do that, then you can select a building nature concept. You know which landscape you're in, which concepts fit the system. And if you know what concepts will fit, you can start tailoring it so it becomes a design, from a concept to a design, and then you can assess the impacts to your system, and then you know whether it's actually the solution you need. So that's what we're going to talk about. Belinda, can you introduce our first speaker of the day, or
yes.
second speaker, sorry.
Yes, this is the first live speaker that we have in the studio today here. Is Arjen Luijendijk. Arjen is a coastal morphology specialist at Deltares and Delft University of Technology. He, in his PhD, he focused on integrated model forecasts for nature-based solutions at sandy coasts. And I believe he knows a lot about the sand engine that Jurre just touched upon. So please, Arjen, join us in the studio today, and welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the invitation. I will be talking about the emerging technologies that can actually feed the system knowledge. I'm a coastal engineer specialized in coastal morphology, and over the last 7 years I studied the sand engine, already mentioned. That's a mega nourishment, 20 million cubic meters of sand was placed here along the Dutch coast in 2011. And I've been involved in building with nature actually from 2008 onwards. Nature-based solutions, asking ourselves, okay, why is it so important to understand the system itself? These nature-based solutions are typically dynamic solutions. So they change, let's say, on a daily basis due to impacts of waves, currents, and wind. So it is therefore key to understand, let's say, the system, the physical system, but also the ecological system, to minimize the risks of failure of your solution. And better, let's say, be prepared for when constructing, for example, coastal infrastructure. What is also even becomes more important in the future is the availability of natural resources. So let's say, in this case, sand. It is expected that it's much scarcer in the future. So that means that you have to really optimally apply the sand and design it in such a way that it actually works. So in other words, sometimes along some parts of the coast in the world, you only have one chance to do it right. As you may know, that coasts and rivers are not stable. They change on a daily basis. And in 2018, we did a global study on, let's say, how dynamic are our beaches in the world. That shows that more than 50% of our beaches are actually showing a long-term change rate, meaning that they are either accreting or eroding at a, let's say, a decadal timescale. So that's very important to realize that those coasts are changing. So at the same time, go to rivers, we also see that rivers are not stable. This is a very nice time lapse from a river in Peru, showing the meandering behavior and also the interaction with the emerging city that is placed there. Again, these natural systems, coasts and rivers are changing, and it's very valuable to understand and also to be able to predict this behavior. So already touching upon that, the history tells us a lot. Here you see a time lapse of a coastal area in the Mekong River Delta in Vietnam, where you see a significant retreat over the last 30 years. And in 2018, we published an article about the global coastal change. And for every location in the world, we can automatically detect the waterline from satellite imagery. So that means that for every year, we can actually present the shoreline position. So if we then draw a transect at a certain location, we actually see over time how it has behaved. So this linear fit, for example, tells us that the coast has been retreating with more than 30 meters per year, which is a significant amount. And it's not likely to stop anywhere soon. So that means that you can already also start making projections into future how this coastline will be located in 10, 20, or 50 years' time. So using this historical information can tell us a lot about the coastal and the coastal resilience. This is an example of the east coast of the US. We're looking at the impact of Hurricane Sandy, which hit this Fire Island. Focusing on the time series that we get from this database, we clearly see that after 2012, when Sandy hit this coast, you see a very nice response of this beach. You see it up to nowadays still recovering from this mega event, this hurricane. So that really demonstrates the resilience. You can also go back further in time. Okay, how did this coast respond to earlier storms? So this provides already very nice insights in the coastal behavior over the last 35 years. Well, nowadays, more and more of these remote sensing products are becoming available. So if you're interested in coastal change anywhere in the world, you can visit the Aqua Monitor, for example, and show different maps of land and water. We also have the shoreline change, the shoreline monitor, actually demonstrating the shoreline change also at a global scale. More recently, we're looking into deriving bathymetry from satellite imagery. So we can actually partly look through the water and detect the subtidal morphodynamics. And here you see a time lapse of a period of 3 years showing how this system behaves and changes over time. So actually you don't have to go to the field anymore, you just use, let's say, freely available satellite imagery to better understand the dynamics in the system. Those images can also be used to actually go and classify our coasts or understand the land use of our coasts and river areas. So here, for example, we're presently busy in detecting, let's say, where sand, mud, or mangroves coasts are located in the world. So we're actually looking into at a pixel level and define whether it's sandy, muddy, or rocky. So this, let's say, whole new emerging technology. Also, many of these applications are being made possible by Google Earth Engine, allow us to go back in time and gain a lot of, let's say, spatial information at a global scale. Another emerging technology is related to numerical modeling. Numerical models have been there for quite some time already, but over the last years we see that these models are becoming more and more interdisciplinary. So other disciplines are connected, let's say, to existing numerical models. And be aware that those models are actually a knowledge carrier, right? They've been developed 20 or 30 years ago, and they're constantly being developed, even let's say nowadays. So that means that by applying these models, you actually apply a lot of knowledge from other colleagues or other people in the world to, let's say, your area of interest. And this can greatly feed your system understanding. Already mentioned, it is integrating different disciplines, so not only hydrodynamics, not only morphology, but also ecology, dune development, wind-related transports, and so on. And it's a great tool to start evaluating alternatives. And what I also experienced in my own career is that if you demonstrate, let's say, the outcome of such a model, that clients are much more susceptible to the discussion. Okay, I understand now what you're saying. Please continue and refine this this layout or this design. Nowadays, we're, let's say, even becoming within, let's say, the new technologies in numerical modeling. We are making much more flexible meshes that can adapt over time. So also there we see some really nice developments going on. Well, this is part of my PhD at the SAN engine. So we use these models to predict the behavior of, in this case, the SAN engine to, for example, assess the lifetime. So after how many years will the SAN engine be dissolved or disappeared? But you can also study the adverse effects. Are we experiencing any downdrift erosion, or what happens to the lagoon over time? Will it be fresh? Will it be salt? Will it be mixed? These can all be studied in these process-based models. And again, these are not new, but adding, let's say, new disciplinaries to these models is a new game changer. This is an example of the different alternatives that have been studied at the sand engine. So you can actually define your initial layout. You say, okay, I do prefer this one or that one. And then you can make these 20-year predictions, and you will see in the bottom row that actually all these simulations tend to end up in a rather similar way. So although the initial design is very different, in the end it all kind of comes together. What we can also use is actually combine this remote sensing information to the numerical modeling. So from the satellite imagery, we could, let's say, detect how the sand engine has been changing after construction, so over the last almost 10 years now. And we can use this data to validate and calibrate our model, but also to refine our system knowledge. So is it really behaving as expected? And if not, why? And that has led to model predictions, or let's say refined model predictions, introducing new processes as well. So by learning, let's say, from this case, from this pilot case, we can actually start applying it anywhere else in the world, having this state-of-the-art knowledge being applied in let's say, in person and in the mind, but also in these numerical tools. And I think a very nice example is, let's say, the mini sand engine that has been constructed in the UK near Beckton. It's called Beckton Sandscaping. And there we have demonstrated the actual added value of having this refined knowledge developed at the sand engine in the Netherlands to be applied just across the North Sea. And the results have shown that these models perform really well. Although it's a different physical system, it behaves really nicely. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your nice presentation, Arjen. I have a question. You talked a lot about physical processes, but do you think there are other processes that are also important?
Yes, definitely. I did focus on, let's say, the physical side, but also understanding the ecological system is very important. So can we understand how the dunes are growing? Can we understand the marine benthos behavior and how that evolves over time, for example? But maybe even more important is understanding the governance setting that you're acting in, right? You're developing and considering a certain solution. You need to know which stakeholders are involved, what can they add or benefit from this project, and also sometimes who are the free riders. They don't pay, but they profit from the solution. And that's a very nice, interesting combination of how to bring that together. So yeah, it's not only about physical system. Yeah.
If you at home have some more questions for Arjen, please feel free to ask them in the chat box, and we will come back to them later in the discussion. Now I would give the word to Simeon, who will introduce our next speaker.
Thank you, Arjen. Arjen gave us a very nice idea of the technologies that are nowadays available to understand your system, which is very nice and very sophisticated. But then, of course, when you understand your system, you still have to think about how you incorporate that into a design that fits the location. I think our next speaker will talk about that. Is Tom Wilms from Witteveen+Bos. Tom is an experienced senior not researcher but engineer, and has been recently working at the Indonesia Building with Nature project with his knees into the mud. So he has a very practical side to him. Please, Tom, go ahead.
Simeon, thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, indeed. I worked and lived for 4 years in Indonesia at our office in Jakarta, and was every 1 month, 2 months in our mangrove restoration project in Central Java, which I will discuss with you. So how did we use the system knowledge? How did we develop it, and how do we bring it further, and how did we use it in design, in implementation, but also our adaptive approach? Because the permeable structures we built them every year, so we could learn every year from the monitoring we did. So in summary, what I'm going to tell is regarding the Building with Nature Indonesia project, and the main lessons learned are that through system understanding and early stakeholder involvement, we were really able, with the entire team, to get sustainable design solutions and implement them. And those resulted in higher vital benefits, it reduced cost, and the institutional process sped up as well. At the right of the image, you see all the benefits a mangrove forest can have. So the vision of our multidisciplinary project, not only a Dutch team, but also with the Indonesians, the local community, as well as 2 ministries, was that we need a mangrove greenbelt forest that provides coastal safety. And that coastal safety will enable the economy to prosper. And when you have a prosperous local economy, that enables to maintain the mangrove greenbelt, and then the circle is round. So you need both. If the coast is not safe, the economy will not prosper. And when the economy doesn't prosper, there will not be coastal safety. That was our vision. So how did we achieve this? Because many of those of this vision is on a very large scale achieved. We do that both with technology and system knowledge. As Jurre already mentioned, and maybe you saw very brief in the website as well, the Building with Nature approach follows 5 steps. And it's not a linear process, it's a cyclic process. So you start with system understanding, like Arjen also explained, you need to understand the system, maybe even better to say systems, because at the bottom you see there is a biophysical system we engineers and ecologists really like and know a lot about, but there is also a socioeconomic system. You also need to understand those to get a better solution. And as Arjen also mentioned, the governance and institutional system is really important. And when you combine all 3, you get to sustainable solutions. And with your system understanding, you make a start. And then the second step is to identify alternatives. And when you have those alternatives, you can evaluate them and make them to an integral solution. Then you refine them, and then you prepare that solution for next phase. So from ideation to design to implementation to use. So how did we do that in Indonesia? Indonesia is a really large country, and we only looked at a stretch of 20 kilometers, and that is at the north coast of Java in Indonesia, and it is a tropical muddy coast. So it's really different than the sandy coast Arjen showed. Mud really behaves different. So you really need to be aware that it's a muddy coast and that it's tropical and how it interacts. Upstream, there are a lot of rice fields, which you see in the middle picture. And at the right, you see how the coastline developed over the years. We used tools which Arjen also showed. So we saw that in 10 years' time, the coast retreated hundreds of meters, and at some locations even up to 2 kilometers. So that's huge. So system understanding, why was that retreat there? There are several challenges in this muddy coastal area. The coastal retreat I already said, but that resulted in flooding. It resulted in a decline and also a loss of aquaculture productivity. And as a result, people moved away or had to be moved away, and economy declined as well. And the causes are canalization, so the sediment comes at a different spot, coastal structures that block sediment transport, but also cutting of mangroves. So the first step, you really need to understand the system. Then you need to develop new solutions, realistic solutions. The images at the right show what doesn't work. Hard structures in muddy coasts don't work. Planting mangroves have often a success rate of only 10%. So 90% of the seedlings planted are lost. But what does work is what we also used in the Wadden Sea, permeable structures. They reduce wave energy, they trap sediment, and when the sediment traps, the soil level rises and mangroves find a good spot to grow again. That was the biophysical part. There's also a socio-economic and an institutional part. So we also worked at the aquaculture together with the communities. We made a sustainable aquaculture program with coastal field schools, where they learned how to do that. And you see shrimp and fish, the pond production raised with 5 to 10 times. At the right, you see local villagers with their regulations. So we also looked at institutional parts, and we trained the people to have a sustainable coastline. Yeah, it sounds all easy. It's a lot of team effort. It's a lot of collaboration to evaluate, elaborate, and detail for the next phase. So we really worked with the entire team, with the local communities, with the governments. In the middle, you see also learning how to build the structures. That was one of the many moments I was in the mud myself. At the right, you see myself as well, to see that wood was eaten by shipworm. So we had to move from wood to bamboo, and we learned many more things as well. So we improved learning by doing, adaptive management, up to a sustainable coastal zone. So lessons learned: you need system understanding, you need stakeholder involvement to get also their knowledge and also their support, and it results in a sustainable solution, higher vital benefits, reduction of cost, faster institutional process, and we only managed to come where we are by learning by doing, and all participants have to be part of an adaptive planning cycle. So learning every year and improving every year. So this is in brief what I would like to share about our project in Indonesia. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom, for a very nice presentation about this mangrove restoration project. Before I start asking you questions, for the audience starts asking questions, I would like to ask Arjen also to the floor, so we can start a discussion together. For the audience, you can still ask questions, and we will try to send them towards the speakers. Let me first start off with you, Tom. I think the mangrove restoration concept is very nice, and there must be a lot of other locations worldwide that could benefit from such a concept to stop erosion, but also for socio-economic reasons. What do you think are the key aspects that you need to understand in a system to make this concept a success?
Simeon, thank you for the question. It's a really valid question, and it all starts with understanding the system at hand. It is really important that you know what that specific location, how the systems look. As we already discussed, sand is really different from mud. So when there is a sandy coast, mangroves might be more difficult to get them back. If it's a much colder climate, mangroves cannot grow. So in the Netherlands, we don't have mangrove forests, but we have willows. So maybe a willow forest can provide the same benefits as a mangrove forest does in a tropical coast. So you need to understand the system, which is the biophysical, but also socio-economic and institutional. And based on that knowledge, together with all the stakeholders and their knowledge, you will find the best solution. And it can be a mangrove forest, it can be a sand engine. A lot is possible.
Thank you very much. Linda, do you have a question for Arjen?
Yeah, I was just checking the questions from the audience, and I saw that there's a question directed to Arjen that is asking, are you aware of studies evaluating the potential of remote sensing to directly estimate wave attenuation?
Thanks for this interesting question. I don't believe or recall that satellite imagery are used for that, to really look at the, let's say, the wave damping due to vegetation. There are, of course, other remote sensing techniques like ship-based radar systems or the X-band radar systems that can tell you, let's say, something about the propagation speed of waves. So not from the space, but I think more land-based remote sensing techniques can be applied for that.
Thank you for your answer.
Yeah, thanks. Back to Tom. I also noticed some questions from the audience, and they relate to a question we discussed earlier, the importance of the locals. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. The locals, as they live there all their life, and their parents and their grandparents as well, they have a lot of knowledge. And of course, from satellite imagery or other data, we collect a lot of information, but some information we cannot, or for us, it's still difficult to collect. And they are every day in the water, in the delta, so they know what's happening. So you can use their knowledge to improve your solution. So you really need stakeholders, the local community with their experience to improve your design.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see there's another interesting question for Arjen. So the discussion of the input of the audience is really coming. So thank you very much for that. And I see that there is a question from Julio, and Julio is asking, I believe, to Arjen, what were the initial problems that were solved by the sand engine? So which problems did you try to solve with the building with nature solution that you chose?
Yeah, very interesting question. View of time did not was not able to let's say explain the reasoning or the motivation. But this part of the Netherlands has been suffering from erosion over the last century due to the diminished sand supply from the rivers. So it's retreating, and therefore this specific location we have to place nourishments every 4 to 5 years. So that means every 4 to 5 years the ecosystem gets, let's say, a new layer of sand. So all the benthos, all the small animals at the sea are kind of covered by a new layer of sand. So the question was more, okay, can we do this in a more, let's say, nature-friendly way by placing one large volume of sand, which then, let's say, is there for a very long time. And initially, it was meant for about 20 years, but if I believe our predictions so far, maybe can last 40 to 50 years. So that means that over that lifetime, we don't have to, let's say, re-nourish this part of the Netherlands.
Thank you for your answer, Arjen. I think you also wrote a couple of articles about this topic.
Yeah, true. And together with Alexander van Oudenhoven, we also developed other PhDs and also contributed it. So we have a very nice book. It can be linked, can be found on the EcoShape website soon.
It's a very interesting story, Arjen, especially the part about the benthos. Very interesting. I also hear you say that there's a good prospect for the sand motor and the sand engine taking this concept. We also like to ask basically the same question to Tom. What are the prospects now in the area, and how do you see Demak change over the years?
The Demak area, it really changed. When we started over 6 years ago, as I also showed in the slides, it was really in decline. Villages had to leave, villagers had to leave, they had to be relocated. and people really said, yeah, we don't want to go, but we don't see how we can stay. So with our project, we gave them some future. We helped to stop the erosion. We started to bring back the mangrove forest, and the coastline is prospering not only by the protection which is provided, but also with the aquaculture, which was another part of the project. Now the livelihood really increased. People want to stay, they can stay, also because the coastline is protected. Of course, there are still challenges. Land substance is an issue in many deltas and in this location as well. But the swift erosion that was there, it stopped. The erosion is halted, and there is a future for the people living there.
That sounds like a very good prospect.
Yes.
Linda, do you have any more questions?
Yeah, I think I saw another question. Arjen, you touched briefly upon a similar project that has been carried out in the UK. Are there plans for more sand engines around the area where there are sandy coasts? Do you know of any?
Yes, I know that there are engineering firms are considering to design one in West Africa. There's one placed already in Sri Lanka. So I'm trying to get hold of their findings and how that evolved over time. It's of course not the scale of the sand engine as we seen it here in the Netherlands, but already, let's say, the concept is kind of regenerated somewhere else. And I think that's very nice to see, and I think there's a lot of new opportunities for that as well. Yeah.
So we can see that the idea of the concept is really spreading and finds application in other areas than only here in the Netherlands.
Yeah, and I think for us as a community, it's very good to also get findings from those applications, right? Because it's not only sending, it's also learning from their experiences. So we can kind of develop as a community on how those sandy solutions actually perform.
Well, I think we have time for another question. Simon?
I think so too. I would like to ask a question basically to the both of you. I'm just wondering now, we've heard a lot about new technologies. We've heard about really down to earth communicating with your locals is very important, and maybe also local knowledge. Where do you think we can go in the future, and what will be possible when we follow this transect going up into technological advances, but still having to cope with local communities and situations?
And I think that the next step, and we just discussed it before this webinar, is that given the knowledge that we developed from the pilots and the tools that we developed, I think the next step would be to start applying it at other locations in the world. So to develop our tools and our systems, embed them in a certain environment that we can actually directly or very quickly just show what the concept means for a client who may be interested in. And I think with all the remote sensing data, all the global data that is also becoming available, that is not far from now. And then I think you can really start interacting with the client who also doesn't have the solution in mind, but he's triggered by the concept, or he's inspired by the concept. I think we have the knowledge and the tools available to just put it on the table and start interacting with those interested parties into kind of upscaling it or applying it in that location.
Yeah, I agree with you, Arjen. I think the knowledge is there, it's growing, and it needs to grow further, and we have to do it together as well. It's not only Dutch, it's always with the local community, it is with the people involved there, and together with all the other enablers in this webinar series, we can bring it further. So it's a path we have to follow together, be interdisciplinary, be able to adapt, because a lot is unknown, a lot is changing, and I think that is the way towards the future.
And making that a little bit more practical, where should we start by achieving that?
Talking to each other, and it doesn't matter to who.
And I think also setting a new dot on the horizon, right? We have seen a lot of pilots, and that typically work or doesn't work at those specific locations. And I think we have to kind of let go of those pilots and learn with everything we've done to then go and explore other applications or other opportunities.
Yeah, sounds very, very good. Lena, do we have time for more questions?
I'm not quite sure. Maybe let's check if there are more questions from the audience. Yeah, I see one more. Mangroves and aquaculture are often not compatible. Why did it work well together in your project? I believe that's a question for you, Tom.
Yes.
So back to Indonesia.
Yes, often they are conflicting, and also in history, mangroves were cut for more aquaculture, but then the communities also learned that the mangroves are important for their protection. So they learned the hard way that if you don't have a coastal protection, you also will lose your productivity. So the mindset, their system understanding really had to change, and now they know that they need the mangroves. They protect them. They see there are benefits in the mangrove forest as well. So they make a sustainable green belt next to a more sustainable aquaculture production method.
And I believe that was also a pilot. So do you think it is possible to scale up this idea, maybe also in Jakarta or areas around there?
Yes, replication already takes place. We worked together over the last 5-6 years with the Indonesian Ministries of Public Works and Housing, as well as Marine Affairs and Fisheries, and the latter ministry replicated the permeable structures at I think over 20 locations around Indonesia, on Java and on other islands. So they are really replicating it already. So they see the benefits and they just do it.
Maybe just doing it is a nice closure for this session. So I think that we're through with time. So I'd like to thank you very much, Tom and Arjen, for coming here and presenting and sharing your knowledge with the audience. We would like to close the discussion and then have a short break, 5 minutes, and we will see you back at, well, Dutch time, 4 o'clock. I don't know what it is where you're coming from, but 5 minutes, and then we'll see you again. Thank you very much.